Phew. Hello, everybody. It's 7:07 p.m. on Sunday, May the something or other. I think it's the 27th or the 28th, the day before Memorial Day. I believe tomorrow is Memorial Day. I'm here in the sun hasn't come out at all today. Fullerton, Orange County, California, but and it's not rare to not see the sun. But I gotta be honest with you. And do you realize how much we take the good weather around here for granted in good old California? I want to discuss something with you. This is God dang it, and boy was I on a roll with this too. I have to keep remembering the routine for shooting these videos with shoot a short, upload, and clear the storage, shoot a video, upload, and then wait till everything's uploaded on YouTube and then dump everything and anything in files and anything that's taking up memory on my teensy weensy itty bitty dinky little phone so I can shoot a video for the next day and I get an error message like I did last time. This is a technical drawing of a rocket motor that I've been building in my head. You might want to say I'm a kind of drifting thought, daydreaming idiot savant. So now that you know that about me, okay, so let's, I don't want to use, I want to write. This is the nozzle, of course, the nozzle assembly. This motor is going to have a classic 1, 2, 3 grain segments in it. This motor casing is anodized, extruded, anodized aluminum. Of course, we want to say the wall thickness is going to be 11/64, outer diameter would be around roughly 13/16, which is 29 millimeters roughly. It's going to be a G80 motor, which in other words, it's going to have 80 newtons of total impulse, or specific impulse, or total impulse, or total or specific impulse, which is burn time times thrust pressure. So you multiply those two. This round cap, this enclosure right here, it's got a dome on the inside for curling pressure that vents this way, ducting it down the middle of the rotor through the rocket's exhaust nozzle right here. And I'll tell you why it's going to do that. Let me explain these parts. So that's the nozzle, the main case, the head end closure, which is I just described to you. This guy is a pressure spike solenoid controlled by number 4A, which is a microprocessor. Boy, I can cuss up a storm. When things don't go my way or technical glitches, I gotta tell you, I don't get mad at people. I get mad at things. And I'm watching these videos on YouTube because I used to be a master. I was a mechanic, which is how I learned so much about mechanical engineering and automotive engineering. I was a mechanic for 34 years working on cars and all these idiotic designs and the fact that cars have gone from bad to worse. They're more technically complex and less well developed. And now you're having supply chain problems with getting the right parts and getting parts to work. And I got to tell you, my dear friend May Hunter said, "Jason, you're the only mechanic I know who doesn't drink." And I appreciate that. That was a long time ago, but I watched a video. A guy, young kid. I mean, I say this guy's 25-ish, and he said, "This is why mechanics drink." He points to a triple radiator fan set for some vehicle that's probably got too many damn plastic, electric moving parts to begin with, that's over-engineered and under-reliable. He had to go through three different fan sets before he got one that worked. In the meantime, mechanics and service writers and shop owners are the easy target for customers who feel like complaining because they can't understand why it takes so damn long to replace a radiator fan assembly in their car. Well, that's why. But the driver of the vehicle, they don't realize that, the mechanics, the shop owners, the service writers are all caught in the middle between them and the manufacturer of these parts and these crappy cars. There's almost no good cars on the road right now. And I just go back to the day when I used to work on cars. Back in 1990, cars weren't that bad, and they weren't that hard to work on either. I started in '85, and I got to tell you, I had a blast. I worked for a guy named Hans Grimm, and but anyway, we had a technical glitch. I've already shot all this, half an hour's worth of video down the tube because I was running out of space, and for whatever reason, the CPU for this phone decided to take over, and it locked itself in what I call an endless cycle loop, where it went in a circular track and it closed the entrance door, so I could press one button to X out of that, and then it would get me back to the same error message. So I'd close the error message, and it'd get me back to the same screen that I was trying to X out of. I hit the reset button, waited for that to work. It didn't work, so I basically had to take the phone out, take the battery out, and just completely flush the toilet on this stupid phone. And my recommendation, folks, by the way, if you're going to get a phone, nowadays everybody lives on their smartphone. You're only going to keep the damn thing for about 6 months to a year. Spend some money on, get a good name brand quality phone. If you want an iPhone, that's fine. They're expensive. I heard they're worth it. I don't like Apple products, but my money is on Motorola. If you can get yourself a Nokia, if the Nokia even makes phones anymore, that's fine. I have a brand loyalty. I'm brand loyal to Motorola. I always have been. But if you want to get yourself a Samsung or an LG, stick to name brand phones. Don't get these off brand phones because they're underdeveloped and they're just going to glitch all over the place. And when they do, to what they say, the old saying, to err as human, to really screw things up requires a computer. So these smartphones are computers, and I live my life on this smartphone. And if you would have told me that 10 years ago, I'd be laughing at you. At 53 years of age, I cannot breathe without my smartphone. And this is why I'm teaching rocketry online. Anyway, let's get into the subject matter. Okay, so this guy, the nozzle. Let's not talk about the dimensions. The material of the nozzle is like a hard glass-like hardened epoxy resin fortified with carbon or a little bit of garolite, even some ABS polymers in it. But this is a single-use part that comes with a fuel kit. This is the case. This is T6061 extruded anodized aluminum that in my case, when I start manufacturing these motors, I'm gonna triple heat treat these aluminum motors. First time 30 minutes, 450 degrees in a propane oven. Second time 10 minutes, 450 degrees. Let it cool it off. Third time, I'll cook it for 15 minutes, 450 degrees. So I'm going to triple heat these cases. The reason I want to do that, the more you heat treat aluminum, aluminum has such a high melting point, and it's such a malleable, flexible material, that's such a malleable metal, that the more you heat treat it, you close the gaps between the atoms and the molecules to the point where it becomes a very, very dense, very smelt solid piece that's almost as strong as steel, and I want that. The same thing with this head end closure, which is an aluminum cap with a hole down the middle of it. It's domed there because of the design and nature and placement of the fuel grains. The fuel grains are going to be burning in both directions inside the combustion chamber sleeve, which is phenolic. And of course, you want that fuel grain to be ducted in a circular pattern going straight down the middle, plus the fuel grain burning in the aft direction is going to add to the thrust. Okay, so this is the pressure spike solenoid right here. It's a little DC powered back and forth kick solenoid, like the door-lock motor, solenoid motor in your car. It locks your windows or locks your doors when you hit the lock. This pressure regulator spike is connected to that solenoid. This solenoid is connected. Here, let me move that up because the little button's in the way. Is right here. Is controlled by a microprocessor. That's part number 4A. Never mind this. That was just announcing the latest design Soyuz rocket, at least in snout. This guy right here is the external shelf fuel grain support tube, and I got to tell you, this guy fits in here like that, and this guy fits in here like that. Oh, well, you know what? We're getting ahead of ourselves. The rifle rut. No, not rifle. I shouldn't say that. Just straight cut. Straight rut heat sleeve. This is going to be I would prefer Garolite Triple F. It's a black material. The stuff is super high temp. The problem is when it burns, it does emit pollutants into the atmosphere. So maybe instead of Garolite Double F or Triple F, I might end up just going to traditional brown phenolic, which brown phenolic, by the way, is custom machined and fit as combustion chambers in liquid rocket motors, especially for the Delta 6 Heavy that was built by Boeing. Of course, that wasn't a Boeing design. That was designed by somebody else. But Boeing did a good job on that rocket, in my opinion. This sleeve, then this guy right here, this is a spiked shelf. It has square ruts to fit the fuel grain in, basically like toothpaste, in a couple of channels or ruts. Basically the same type of channel that's in front of your window on the inside. Your windows slide back and forth. This is a side view. This is a hole where this pressure regulator spike comes in and out of, and this is a hole where the exhaust gases internally get rebounded by this, come out this direction. And of course, these fuel grain segments are not, sized to realistic size. Just letting you know what they are. These guys are laid down like toothpaste. This outer diameter is shaved and fits neatly inside ruts inside this phenolic sleeve right here. So that goes in that with the fuel grains, and it goes in that and slips with that. Aft closure, solenoid with special seals on the front of it. Of course, is connected to the rod, and you stick that all down the middle. There's some down the center of this spike sleeve. It has a lubricated trainer rings to keep the spike centered. And then, of course, there's another trainer ring in the nozzle itself. So a little bit more machine work, a little bit more of an elaborate design. But I tell you what, the advantages of this particular type of rocket motor, which I will be developing when I get the resources, is it's going to be an incredibly fast burning, high performance rocket motor. It will be a 2-second drag race motor that will get the rocket, if the rocket can even hold up under the pressure of the acceleration and the force of acceleration, it'll get the rocket vehicle in 2 seconds. It'll shoot off the pad like a bullet and get that rocket up to 3,000 feet in 2 seconds. I think. I don't know. I have to do calculations. I have to consider other things. I'm not really that experienced in drag race rockets, but this is a drag race motor. And don't ask me why I want to do this. I just am very passionate about it. So anyway, so that's pretty much that. So we've got, again, to review, we got the nozzle assembly, the aluminum outer sleeve or case, the case, head enclosure with bolts, of course bolts on the nozzle as well, and of course the pressure spike solenoid with 2 attachment holes there in the spike itself, installed through this hole, through ruts, through holes in the spike shelf. But first, before you do install, if you install this to this, through that and that, you put the sleeve in, and then of course these ruts right here have fuel grains loaded into them, and you put this in there and that in there. Then you install the nozzle and aft closure and the and this guy to that guy and that guy in there like that, yada yada yada, and you hook this guy up to the an event on something with 4 events. So you're going to need separation charge. You're going to need solenoid control for the pressure volume spike, which acts like basically the nozzle in a garden in a nozzle for a garden hose. You pull the spike back, it allows higher pressure and greater volume. You pull it back too far, it just vents a lot of volume, but somewhere there the volume increases where you're just dumping water out, but it's slightly lower pressure. You pinch the pressure, and there's a sweet spot. We have the optimum amount of volume and pressure to create the greatest amount of thrust. That's what this guy controls, and so it's like it's a pressure volume control as well for a rocket motor. More advanced versions of this rocket motor are going to have nozzles that gimbal, side vent nozzlets near the nozzle itself for multi-engine rockets to protect the long axis steer maneuvering of the rocket as it's in powered phase of flight vertically, of course. And then, of course, halon or liquid nitrogen cooling systems, not necessarily the heat generated by the case, but the heat of the exhaust, the flaming hot exhaust on the nozzle. I've been told that standard AP fuel, solid fuel like AP, which is ammonium perchlorate, aluminum with the rust oxide and elastomized, polymerized, spongy but very, very high temp, high pressure epoxy, 2 parts epoxy with catalyst. Space shuttle booster rockets. They're fairly complicated and expensive. It's a fairly complicated and expensive fuel to mix. It's kind of low yield, but I've been told those rockets can liquefy stainless steel nozzles within 5 to 10 seconds. And obviously, if your nozzles liquefy during powered phase of vertical flight of the rocket, then you're not going to have so much of the CATO. You're just going to have the motors are just going to vent all their fuel very quickly, and the rocket will obviously lose speed and fall back down to Earth without a parachute and go crash. So cooling systems for these nozzles are critical. This is probably going to end up, even though that's 3 grain segments, this is probably going to end up being a drag race motor. Throttle control for a drag race motor is kind of redundant, and I estimate this would be probably about a 2 to 2.3 second motor. I mean, it's going to burn so quick, and this is what I explained in the last video, and I'm going to explain this again. When you start a campfire, if you use pieces of wood that are too large, it's going to be very, very hard to start that campfire. The reason you chop wood up and you break it up into manageable sizes is because when you put broken pieces of wood together, the smaller the pieces and the more air gaps there are between the pieces of wood, the more when the fuel burns, it actually draws in oxygen from the surrounding atmosphere, and that oxygen serves as an oxidizer that mixes with the wood, which serves as a fuel, and that creates your campfire. Burning wood. Now, people don't really get taught those sort of things in school, and they don't really think about it. They just take the burning process, the wood burning in a fire pit process for granted, and cook s'mores and tell ghost stories around the campfire and all that good stuff. But anytime you're going to make anything that's going to generate heat or any type of energy, you need 2 things. You need an oxidizer and you need fuel. You need a fuel and you need an oxidizer. And in a lot of cases, especially with solid fuel, most times with solid fuel, or half the time with solid fuel, you need a catalyst. AP fuel, black lightning fuel, which scares the hell out of me. It's chromite fuel, and then magnesium fuel, which is safe, but it's high yield and the stuff ignites almost instantly, so you got to be careful. Those have polymerized 2-part epoxy resins in them. Synthetic resins, I would assume. They don't actually use real tree sap anymore. Resin relates to tree sap, which is a tree's blood, I guess. Those need those catalysts. The epoxy red two-part epoxy as a catalyst to hold the magnesium and potassium nitrate together, which is my favorite motor, or ammonium perchlorate and aluminum together. Motors like zinc chromate, or just zinc and sulfur motors, which are not popular at all because they're so goddamn dangerous. They explode most of the time. They're dry pack motors, and you have to mix them with a medium. But the medium doesn't stain them. It just helps bind the two powders, the sulfur and the zinc. Zinc is a heavy metal, certain proportion to sulfur. Sulfur, I'm assuming, is the oxidizer, but zinc is a heavy metal that's also flammable. Certain types of oxidizer, in this case, sulfur. They're called ZN05 or ZN105 motors. They're dangerous as hell. Don't attempt them because most of the time they blow up. Sugar motors are dangerous as hell because they have a 48-hour shelf life of basically 40% sugar. Wait, no. Hold on. Oh, yeah, 40% sugar, 60% potassium nitrate. Very, very straightforward mixture. You can add a little bit of iron oxide as a burn rate controller. If you want 35% sugar, 65% potassium nitrate, that's fine. I've tried it, and it seems to leave ceramic residue in the pan that I burn the mixture in. So you don't want bubbles of molten ceramic shooting out the back of your rocket, possibly blocking the nozzle. So I didn't like that. I just stick to the 40-60. But again, sugar motors are dangerous. People don't seem to understand that when sugar, refined sugar mixes with potassium nitrate, number one, after you mix the two, you can't tell which is which. So you better weigh both out individually and then mix them. And it needs to be airflow. And it's a dry pack, and the stuff needs to be blended, so blend the items separately. Then when you go to pack it in, after 48 hours, the sugar molecules, they fuse with the potassium nitrate molecules, and it energized. They doubled up on each other. They turn into an explosive. So traditional sugar motors, after 48 hours, turn into explosives. Now, John Wickman has theories. John Wickman has a theory about that. Gary L. Stein has a theory about that. There's some other rocketeers who work on rocket engines. They have theories about that as well. They're all right, but what I figured out is that molecularly, the sugar molecules and the potassium nitrate molecules, they're both hygroscopic. They end up just mixing and blending and fusing with each other, and they energize each other, and it's like the energy from a head-on collision. You quadruple the force of just driving into a wall at 90 miles an hour. I know that's a grim illustration, and you double up, and it becomes an explosive, and it's a fact, and people can't figure out why. So now people use corn syrup potassium nitrate, which is what I'm going to try because that's the poor man's type of fuel, and nobody's going to eyeball you for buying Caro corn syrup and some tree stump remover. But I don't want to encourage anything yet. I'm discussing motor design, and kind of just, maybe I shouldn't be talking about this. I said I wouldn't, but I'm so enthusiastic about it. And just a legal disclaimer, by the way, I do want to say that anybody decides to take it upon themselves to try anything, and it's something, and they don't follow directions. They don't follow my directions, the directions outlined in the video. I'm absolving myself of any and all responsibility. You will not come after me and hold me liable especially if you didn't do anything right, if you did things incorrectly, if you made a mistake somewhere. My designs work. They work fine. This is experimental. Do not try it at home. I haven't even tried it myself yet. So kind of, hands off. We discussed the traditional design motor yesterday. I did make a little mistake with that aft closure. The aft closure is supposed to have a small hole and a countersink in it where you pour in a black powder, and that small hole lets the black powder, come through and make contact with the forwardmost end of the delay grain. And once the delay grain burns through to that forward end, then obviously that ignites the black powder charge, which explodes, sends the air pressure to the top of the rocket, separates the 2 or 3 halves with all the shock cords and parachutes. That's your recovery system. Anyway, so that's pretty much that. So, but let me talk about this phenolic sleeve. I was discussing dimensions before, but I'd rather discuss materials. This external shelf fuel grain support tube with these external spikes, I can't decide if I want to make this ultra high temperature carbon fiber so it's reusable, ultra high temperature titanium, which would be impossible to machine. I forget I said titanium, or if I should make it out of steel, or if I should make it out of aluminum, or like I said, or a non-reusable form of black phenolic or garolite. I'm leaning towards garolite. So the fuel, the shells, the epoxy, everything is just loaded in one piece with support channels down the middle for the spike, and just make these single use units. So the sleeve, the external spikes of spike rut sleeve with all the fuel grains in it, and the nozzle and all the O-rings. In the fuel grade segments, or no, I'm sorry, it doesn't have it. It has it here. All that comes in a reload kit. But what you get is you get the case, the forward closure, the solenoid, the spike, the microprocessor. That comes in a traditional kit. Now you can, but I'm just kind of spitballing, thinking things through how I'm going to proceed with mass manufacturing this when I get the funds to do this. So let's go down to this pressure regulator spike. I'm hoping that I did discuss it. I'm not going crazy because I shot two of the same video today because of that mishap with the memory on my phone. That this spike, it controls pressure and volume at the same time. Now the tip of this spike, we're going to have to play around with the profile, because depending on the profile, I can affect more focused at ultra high pressure out the nozzle of the rocket motor. But then again, I have to study up on that, because once you get past transonic speeds and sounds and pressures, it's not that I'm lost. I mean, I can artistically design a jet aircraft for the rest of them, but I don't really understand the laws of dynamics and thermodynamics above 754 miles an hour, at 10,000 feet, which is basically you pass that speed by 1 mile an hour, you have gone transonic or supersonic. You break the sound barrier at that speed at 10,000 feet. Sea level, it's around 750 miles an hour. No, excuse me. Sea level, it's a little lower. It's like between 700 to 710 miles an hour, but I could be mistaken about that too. So anyway, but the purpose of the spike, the solenoid kind of kicks the spike back and forth. It doesn't twist it or turn or anything. The purpose of the spike is to control the amount of volume and pressure and get that sweet spot, so that once the pressure in the combustion chamber goes down or up, obviously that the spike will pull back and maintain optimum amount of thrust coming out the nozzle in the way of controlling the amount of volume and pressure coming out the nozzle, so as to maintain that optimum boost from the rocket motor's exhaust until all of the fuel is spent. Now, this is kind of a redundant system for a rocket motor with that type of design of fuel grains, because again, this is going to be at the very best a 2.3 to 2.5 second motor. I mean, this motor is going to cook, and it's going to clean. It's going to make the whole dinner in less than 2.5 seconds. This motor is really going to shoot off the pad. So anything that's this microprocessor controlled solenoid with the spike rod is going to do, it's going to happen very quickly. So this system right here, I like this system, but with the pressure regulator spike, I got to be honest with you folks, it's more suited for SSTO motors with nozzle cooling systems where you have several bottles of halogen or halon or argon, not argon, liquid nitrogen or halon. Actually, liquid nitrogen is better because it's non-emissions. You duct it down tubes or rails and spray it on the hottest parts of the nozzle which is right probably the first upper 20% of the small inside diameter of the rocket nozzle itself. Again, you gotta eyeball it. You can't make the nozzle too wide. It'll vent. It'll allow all the volume of the fuel escape very quickly with no pressure. Your rocket won't get off the launch pad. It'll just stay there and make a really neat fire and catch everything on fire. And of course, the launch safety officer and the range safety officer are going to kick you out of the club and ban you. But of course, if it's too pitched, you're not letting enough volume through, generating a tremendous amount of pressure. But you're going to pitch the pressure and the volume if the dilation goes down to a pinpoint. Not to mention the fact you're creating an explosion hazard, because now you're creating a natural disruption of pressure inside the combustion chamber than when it wants to escape. So it's a balancing act. This spike is meant to balance all that pressure for optimum performance coming out the rocket's nozzle, the optimum amount of volume and pressure to create the best, most efficient, most high performance use of the burning fuel grains themselves. So, and maybe the best use of this pressure regulator spike and solenoid system is going to get you a 3-second flight instead of a 2.5 one. I don't know. I haven't even built one of these yet because I don't have the facilities or the cash. Anyway, so that's that. We're at 31:25, but I want to do a little bit longer video because I'm so upset that, okay, where'd those papers go? Oh my goodness, people. Oh, there we go. Okay, so this one is not as colorful as the last one is. I'm just going to use one color because, the information is fairly self-explanatory. Shrouds, oh goodness gracious, I'm writing upside down. Spill hole. Shroud section. Shroud lines. Number of shroud lines. Okay, I had back in the early 2000s when I was rocking and rolling with my eBay account. You gotta. By the way, with online what do you call it, online selling accounts, you really got to stay in for the long run. You got to show these people like OfferUp, Mercari, and eBay. You got to show them that you're not just going to try and sell stuff, hope to make $1 million in the first week, and if you don't, bail out. They're very secure sites. They store personal information, including all your banking information. So they're high security sites. So they're really uptight about security. And if you're going back and forth, they're going to shut you down. OfferUp is extending me a second chance, but Shopify won't touch me. eBay hates my guts because they think I owe money. But I have a complaint against them about that. They actually kind of owe me money. OfferUp does owe me money, but I'm willing to overlook it because it was a small item. But here's my point. If you're going to open up an online seller's account, especially with Amazon, which is between Amazon and eBay, I think eBay is still the hot ticket, but Amazon is a close second. Amazon is really snooty. They make you jump through a lot of hoops. I spent nearly 30 hours trying to get my Amazon account online, and you know what they said? Sorry, sir, we just don't feel you're good enough for our community, in so many words. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and build my own website. I think that's the best thing because, Top Flight and Aerotech and Cicerone Technologies, which Cicerone Technologies is now a government contractor, and other, major rocketry businesses, they don't make their money selling stuff on a marketing website or a sell it yourself website. They pretty much are their own people. I think it's a sign from God. I'm going to do the same thing. So, but my website is going to be for educational purposes. It's going to have links for tutorials for certain math formulas that apply to rocket design, practical design, sort of like Jacob's Rocketry, which, by the way, check it out, jacobsrocketry.com. I'm not sure if it's a .com or .org. Jacob's Rocketry absolutely, positively rocks. It is the rock star of free information websites. They have stuff for sale, but Jacob's Rocketry is like this. Oh my goodness, it's like it is just aerospace engineer's dream. They talk about stuff in Jacob's Rocketry that applies to real rockets. And you can learn how to make electric matches. They have stuff you can buy. They have links to instructional videos. So check it out, Jacob's Rocketry. Also check out Top Flight Parachutes. They make these. They make the best model rocket, high-powered rocket parachutes of anybody else on the planet. They do what they do so well, and nobody else is stepping up to the plate. Nobody wants to make parachutes. Okay, so Top Flight Rocketry or Top Flight, they basically have the entire market, and I'm sure they're doing pretty well. So check them out online as well. Okay, let's talk about parachutes. I'm going to kind of hold up the paper for this one. Let's talk about the anatomy of a parachute. This is a really bad drawing. Wow, are my hands actually that big? Okay, so number one, we have the spill hole, which is a hole on top of the parabolic, the shroud pieces that make up the shroud, which is a parabolic, which is the parachute. And then you have the shroud segments. That's this a parabolic shape, like a half circle shape with the top cut off. Those are shroud segments, and those come down to shroud lines right there in number 4. And then we've got number 2, the shroud section. So I'm going out of order. So spill hole, shroud section, shroud segments, shroud lines. And little footnote here. Oh my goodness. How is anybody supposed to read my handwriting, myself included? Number of shroud lines segments depends. Number of shroud lines and shroud line segments depends on size, weight of recovered vehicle. Basically, a rocket is a vehicle. It's a transportation vehicle. It's like a shuttle, considerably. So let's read that again. So number of shroud lines / segments depends on size and weight of recovered vehicle. Those SRBs, they're recoverable, they're rebuildable. They're the ultimate reloadable motor, as Sport Rocketry said one time. I saw an article and it was really cool. The Morton Thiokol a manufacturing facility in Utah, and it's connected by train rail to Las Vegas. The place is so cool. Anyway, so that's the basic anatomy. But since, don't take parachutes for granted, but talking about the SRB boosters for the space shuttle, it had, when that fuel was spent and when those SRBs came down, believe me, those are incredibly large, heavy, complex mechanisms. They have no less than 3, a triangular set of 3 recovery parachutes, and I guarantee you each one of those has a drogue parachute. The concept of a drogue parachute is a little tiny parachute that cups the air and yanks really hard on lines that pull out the larger parachutes to cup the air and slow down and control the rate of descent of the SRB boosters. It has 3 of them alternating red and white, and it's an awesome sight. I wish I was there to see those silly things touch down. I'm a little afraid of the ocean anymore because sharks, but I can go on a boat that's shark bite proof. Anyway, but it's just an amazing thing. I've seen video replays of those SRBs, space shuttles SRBs, those 3 huge red and white parachutes. And I'm talking, when I say parachutes, I mean these things might have been as much as 1,000 feet across each. The SRBs themselves, I believe, are around roughly four to 5 stories tall, and it had three of those. Maybe, you know what? Maybe I was mistaken. Maybe they're only 500 feet in diameter, but they were big, and they deployed perfectly, and there's no wrinkles or side hang-ups. Let's talk about the concept of the design of a proper parachute. There's percentage of parabol, and I'm going to go ahead and turn this paper over. So there's a percentage of parabolic. That's basically the shape of the parachute itself. Now, a parachute doesn't work unless it's open, so we're considering the overall operating circumstance or operating in normal operating environment open shape of the parachute. The parabol, the percentage of parabol, if you take a circle and you cut off the top of it, this is a parabol. That's the rest of circle, or rest of sphere. Excuse me, rest of sphere. A parabol. The percentage of that parabol, just say, for example, this, just a rough example, I'm looking at around 17.5%. This parabol is not desirable because it's too shallow. There's not enough downward curvature to cup the to cup the air. So therefore, the air will flex it upward, and it'll simply invert, turn inside out, and then it'll fold backwards on itself, and it'll be one big, very, very long, sorry-looking streamer or party favor falling from the sky, or unfortunately, someone who fell off the side of a building wearing a dress, and her dress is going up over her face, and you can see everything underneath. That's not what we're talking about. So that's 17.5. Let's just say 18%, make it a round number. Now the parabol, we're going to increase to 35, 39%. That's kind of what you want. Again, leave comments in this comment section. I've turned on, catch all comments, even if you use potty mouth verbiage. But the percent, 39%, right at 39%. Maybe let's just lower that down to 37% to be safe. 37% of total parabol, which is a cut off the top of a basketball. You have that circular piece. Well, these precisely cut parachute segments, I don't know how these seamsters can make patterns for these, but these segments put together form a circular pattern, and when fully cupped, in other words, they're in full control of the vent with no crosswinds or anything. That percentage of parabol is absolutely critical. At 37%, that is the max for cupping power. At 45%, you're actually getting close to the 50% mark, which is even if you do get right up to past 50%, you're putting your life in jeopardy, because the extra 52% is actually going on the downside of the curve, and it's going to cup inward and cause this thing to do what's called a mushroom collapse. And the same thing, woman falling off the side of a bridge, her dress goes up over her head and the side of her arms, and you can't see anything but the stuff that only her husband's supposed to see, etc., etc. You cannot exceed a 50% parabol on a parachute. Now, Air Force pilots, I believe they have to deal with a parachute like that. And the problem with that parachute is it swings. It's not the problem, but it swings and swings back and forth. And it's highly visible because it's red, white, and blue, and it controls at a very, very slow descent. It doesn't have a spill hole in the top. So they're dangerous as all get up. They just want a slower descent for the pilot who's probably gone through some shock because he got shot down, or the catastrophic mechanical failure. The aircraft she or he was flying, or even pilot error, unfortunately. Then they've got to go with this big dopey parachute that I wouldn't even use to make a camping tent with. But the thing is, with a 50% parabol, that cupping means that you've got enough of your hand on top of somebody's bald head. You can kind of rock it around, wax on, wax off. Somebody with a spear bald head, they want you to apply a coat of wax to their head, their bald head, so it can shine and distract their enemies. It'd be like a superhero for a man who's spear bald. But I'm getting punch drunk. But the thing is, because it cups so much air, it actually forms the lower part of what I would consider an invisible sphere, and it could rock back and forth on it like a form-fit bearing, a bearing shell and a bearing in the middle. So that's why when you see the American Air Force pilots bailing out of their aircraft, you have to see them in one of these parachutes. That's why they rock back and forth wildly. I mean, they swing like a pendulum, nearly 25 degrees in one direction, another 30 in the other, and they drift 4 miles. So I guess that's standard MO. They want that design. You do not, and I repeat, you do not want that design with your rockets. 37% max parabol means you have plenty of stopping power. Your rocket will not rock back and forth because it's now, instead of being half round, the shroud lines are going to jump on one side and compress on the other, and they're going to naturally stabilize, so that your rocket isn't going to be swinging back and forth. Because an U.S. Air Force pilot can swing back and forth all they want after criminal negligence of crashing a $20 million fighter jet. Sorry, I'm just kidding. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your freedom. Boy, I shouldn't be saying that now. I think tomorrow's Memorial Day, and boy, am I going to get lynched for that. I'm sorry. My dad was in Vietnam. My grandfather was in the Marines. I'm sorry, just making fun of some flyboys. Well, anyway, I don't have the right to do that. So that lean parabol is going to keep the shroud lines hyper stretching one end and bowing up in the middle, and that's going to correct itself. So your rocket is going to fall in a reasonably straight descent. It'll descend sideways, but for the most part, with a 37% parabol, your rocket segments are going to stay in a vertical or upright position. They're not going to be banging and swinging back and forth and going sideways, unless you were dumb enough. I shouldn't say dumb enough, unless you used poor judgment to launch your rocket on a windy day, which is the biggest mistake you can make. You launch your rocket on a windy day, you will never recover it, and if you do, it will be in pieces. I guarantee it. So a lot to talk about the meteorology and environment in a desert setting for which a lot of high-power rocket meets sponsored by NAR Tripoli are held. So let's talk about something else. Percentage of spill hole. Spill hole on the top. And there's the parachute there. So what do you think happens? We've got a parachute with 37. Maybe we can go between 33 to 37% parabolic on a parachute, so it keeps itself straight. It doesn't rock back and forth. The rocket can drift sideways up to a mile or two. You don't want it to do that, but again, you were ignorant enough to launch it in the high winds, so don't do that. Don't make me repeat myself. But how about the rate of descent? When you completely cup the air, there's no way the air inside the cup is the 30. Let's go with the 30. Yeah, let's go with 34%. Okay, here we go. 34% parabolic. There's just no way. The air is not going to go anywhere. It's going to stay in that parabolic, and of course, naturally correcting the shroud line over here is going to bow. And when it's wanted to swing to the left, and it's going to go tight over here when it wants to swing to the left. Don't swing to the left, don't swing to the right. The parabolic controls the angle of descent, the vertically upright angle of descent. But the rate of descent, in other words, how fast is your rocket descending? If it only descends, for lack of a better, 1 foot per second, which is pretty damned slow, then that rocket's going to drift forever. I would say I would say the parachute doesn't have a spill hole. If it does, it's probably the size of a lead pencil. You don't want to do that. If your parachute for your rocket looks more like like a cheerleader's skirt. I don't mean to bring up colorful stuff. I love and respect women. I just can't think of anything else. But cheerleaders, they need to dress more modestly too, in my opinion. I'm 53 years old, and I might have a heart condition. Um, oh my God, why am I saying this? So if the spill hole's too large, you might as well just be putting a hula skirt on the rocket and see if it recovers that way. Well, guess what, folks? If you're launching a 500-pound rocket, you better do your calculations. What is the total overall diameter of the parachute? How many parachutes? What kind of drogues are you going to run? Then the percentage of parabolic. The heavier rockets, anything above 300 pounds, I'd say you almost go with 37, 30, 38, almost 39, even 40% parabolic, and really cup that air and go with maybe a 9 to 10% spill hole. Now, why am I saying 9 to 10%? Well, I mean, I can use numbers and say that parachute for a 300-pound rocket is going to be no less, get this, about 15 to 20 feet in diameter. So how big is the spill hole going to be? Well, remember we talked yesterday about the rate of descent. When that 300-pound rocket hits the ground, we don't want a descent speed or impact speed of no more than 15 miles an hour. So how are we going to attain that? Again, you got to do math. The weight of the rocket segments, the number of parachutes, and the percentage of parabolic that's cupping the air, anything over 300%, a good rule of thumb for parabolics is 40%. But why the hell am I telling that when I'm telling you not to even design and build the things, just buy them from Top Flight, because Top Flight has got this all worked out. Well, folks, maybe you want to make your own parachute, and that's exciting stuff. There's a website, there's a site on the internet where you can download patterns for rockets. You have to enter your data as to how many segments you want the rocket to have, and then you can scale up the design to umpteen million sizes. But you have to cut the patterns out after you print them. You have to put them on top of fabric. Then you have to cut the fabric according to the prints, and then you have to start sewing everything together. My mother would do that because she was an accomplished seamstress. She was very, very, very good at what she did, and she did excellent work, and I loved her for it, and I miss her for that. Of course, well, I'll talk about that later. Anyway, I paid her with hugs and kisses. Anyway, but percentage of parabol, you've got to consider your rate of descent versus how much the rocket's weight is that parachute supporting, and how hard is that going to pull down on the parachute, and of course the percentage of parabol times somehow a math equation times the diameter of the spill hole times taking into consideration the weight of the rocket, and times as well, is it a shared effort? Is the rocket going to have one parachute, or is it going to have two? Or in the case of these supplemental the SRBs, supplemental rocket boosters on the space shuttle, 3. And I'm pretty sure, like I said, those parachutes, maybe they're as little as maybe a couple hundred feet in diameter. I don't know. Maybe I'm out of my mind, but it seems to me those parachutes are very, very large. Their parabolic was about roughly 32%, but there was 3 of them, and they had a very, very tiny spill hole in the top. They did have spill holes. They looked like the spill holes couldn't have been more than 5 feet in diameter, but considering the fact they're 4,000 pound, 4 million pound thrust, ammonium perchlorate, aluminum solid fuel boosters that were nearly 5-6 stories tall. They had to, NASA has to do what NASA has to do. So does Rockwell. Rockwell's the main designer of the space shuttle. So those 3 things. So you have the weight of the rocket, you have times the diameter of the parachute, the weight of the rocket, the rate of descent, and no more impact speed to the ground, terra firma, no more than 15 miles an hour. Then you have the diameter of the parachute selection, the number of parachutes, the parabolic percentage of the parachute, which should kind of be left up to the designer. That may be you if you want to fool around with a sewing machine. And the diameter of the spill hole. And again, you're going to have to work with all that. I can give you examples, but then again, we can talk all night about this. I had a friend that I lost touch with. He was buying a lot of stuff for me on eBay. He was one of my first regular customers, and I've kind of been in and out of commercial end of rocketry because I don't know what my problem is, but now I'm committed to aerospace and teaching rocketry online. I'm 53 years old. I'm not going to vector from this particular career decision, although it's always feast or famine. But, I explained things to him technically. The first time I talked to the guy, he was a really nice guy. He bought a lot of stuff for me, mostly the little launch controllers. A really great, nice guy. And I started talking about parachutes and how parachutes work. I don't know where the hell this came from because I just started talking about the technical aspects of parachutes and rocket parachute performance. And it's just, I'm thinking to myself, where in the heck does all this come from? Well, that's what I'm talking about, folks. I don't want to brag about my gifts because they are gifts. Jeff Bezos said it best. You don't brag about your gifts because they've been given to you. They're not yours. They didn't originate from you. And that's what I say about my gifts too. I've been gifted for aerospace design and engineering. I'm a gifted person. I've been given that gift by my maker, by God, I guess. I don't want to get religious or preachy about it, but it's just like, how in the world do I just automatically know that stuff? And I did way back 20 years ago, and I know it right now. Of course, I'd like to think my personality and my looks are a little bit more refined, but I think I still weigh the same, if not more. That is a depressing subject. Anyway, we're at the 56-minute mark, and we've discussed the theory of parachutes, parabolic, a percentage of spill hole, but we haven't really covered it thoroughly. We're just kind of glossing over it. But you understand that the parabolic, the percentage of parabolic, which is the section of the circle that we're going to take to form the cup part of the parachute itself that cups the air, slows down and controls the rate of descent. What fine tunes that rate of descent is a spill hole. A larger spill hole will allow more air to come out of the cup and just vent out the top, and that'll cause a faster drop. But a smaller vent hole will hold the air in better, sort of like trying to squeeze toothpaste out of a tube fast. You can only squeeze so fast out of such a small hole. If that hole is restrictively small, you're looking at slower descent rate with a soft impact, less than 15 miles an hour, but your rocket may be drifting for a couple miles because even though the delay charge went off on time, your rocket's descent rate is too slow at around roughly 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 feet. And 5,000 feet, it may be, say, 20 feet, at 10 feet a second. That might be a little too slow where the thing is just going to take like a couple minutes or 3 or 4 minutes to descend to the earth. Well, again, in 5 minutes from 5,000 feet, a little bit of wind or thermals, it's going to carry that rocket. You're going to have to break out the gas-powered Honda Quad or ATV and go quadding it across the playa to look for your rocket, or you see where it is. It's just 4 miles away. If you want to walk, that's good exercise, but you're there at a launch meet. You're there to launch rockets, not fool around with an ATV looking for some broken, busted up rocket parts, stuff like that. That does, it's par on course, but you're on the road for an hour looking for your rocket or driving, 4 miles up and 4 miles back. It is kind of a buzzkill, especially when you spend an hour and a half doing that. And the launch meet has to shut down at 2 because of the crosswinds from the desert and won't resume until after 6 p.m. after the sun's gone down and the Earth's crust has cooled down and there's no more air turbulence, so you do night launches. So, time things, calculate things. Like playing chess, you got to plan your moves in advance. Anyway, my name is Jason Wampler. This has been another episode of the Rocket Minute. We're at the 59 minutes, 55 seconds. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Thanks for being my great audience. Hit the like, hit the subscribe, send me money. I'll send you an address. Thanks a lot. Leave a comment. Bye-bye.